May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and everything that happened, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable and free of economic hardship and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of do as little harm as possible. So today we have some more pieces from the work in progress Tassajara Stories, the early years with Shunryu Suzuki. All right, well, it starts off with a piece called Sacred. Now, I said, well, start reading that just as soon as we've had our pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, if you wish, hit pause and meditate, or as some of the Christians say, be still and know God. I don't say that, but I think that communicates it pretty well in language that I don't use. Actually, there's only one word there I don't use for myself, but I use it with others. So meditate or whatever it is you want, and when you're ready to come back, hit unpause, and we'll be here waiting to hit the bell, and we'll get right into this week's presentation of pieces of the work in progress Tassajara Stories. Sacred. Two mystic minstrels from West Bengal arrived at Tassajara in traditional attire and serenaded us with Baul music. That's B-A-U-L music. Their tradition emphasizes cosmic love and transcends narrow sectarianism. A famous Baul song goes, "Everyone asks, Lalan, what's your religion in this world?" Lalan answers, "How does religion look? I've never laid eyes on it. Some wear Hindu malas around their necks, some Muslim tasbihs, and so people say they've got different religions. But do you bear the sign of your religion when you come or when you go?" We didn't understand a word as it was all in Bengali, which made it even better. Those musicians of sacred music were welcome at Tassajara because of the atmosphere of openness that prevailed, especially outside of practice periods. This inclusiveness was not just because Shunryu Suzuki was the abbot. He'd experienced nothing like that in Japan. The influence of his students and the surrounding subculture was also a necessary ingredient. He was strict, yet had a flexibility, at least after he'd come to America, that allowed us to relax and enjoy many possibilities. We didn't homogenize with every non-Zen approach that came our way, but we were welcoming and maybe had a little something rub off on us. Richard Baker was most eclectic in his interests, but at the same time he was skeptical about the benefit of trying out every divergent path that appeared. He called it eating around the edge of the pie. Among those who had their own pie but partook of ours as well, David Steindl-Rast stands out. Brother David, as we called him, was a Benedictine monk who'd practiced Zen with Edo in New York and Sesshin with Yasutani and Soen Nakagawa. He came to the first practice period and was the dishwasher, which is a position that I enjoyed at other times. It's a great place to be if you enjoy interaction with others. He does. He's a friendly, calming presence. From him, we learned about the rules of Saint Benedict, created in the early 6th century, which lay out a fairly middle-way path for monks, strict but not self-abusively so. Their motto was Pax, peace. Brother David said the rules start with an admonition to obey, and explained that to obey means to listen, to pay attention. Like in Zen, they considered every activity to be an opportunity for practice. Like us, they aimed to work in relative silence, with exceptions, as in Richard Baker's example of pass the hammer. The word prayer for Christian monastics is often used to stand for meditation. At Mount Savior Monastery, he'd practiced meditation for years. He said that the abbot there spoke of falling into heaven. They had a farm as well. Brother David told me that there were two things he'd learned to watch out for, which would apply to us: animals and business. He said at Mount Savior, they ran into unexpected complications and responsibilities with farm animals. They created a bakery that got quite popular, and before they knew it, the monks were spending an incredible amount of time balancing the books, driving trucks around, delivering bread, and so forth. I asked Brother David if he believed in a personal God, and he said he could see God including a personal aspect. He later spoke of his view of God not as theistic, but panentheistic, God and nature as one. In his understanding of Christianity, mind and body are one, like Buddhism, as we were learning, and like what I was raised with. He said that faith is the nose on the head of doubt. On Shunryu Suzuki, Brother David said, most of the memories I have of Suzuki Roshi are images. Standing on the bridge, him so small and lifting rocks in the creek. When I first came and sat in the city, he was going around in the zendo with his stick. He bowed behind me. I put up my hood so he could get to my shoulders. He said in a strong voice, "Take this off," meaning the hood attached to the scapular. And he whacked me. The next day he said to me, "Oh, I didn't know this was your okesa," the robe signifying priest ordination, and laughed. One Easter morning, a few of us went with Brother David up the road to the ridge to do zazen, followed by a simple ceremony as the sun rose. When we were getting up to go back, I said that was the first time I'd participated in a Mass. Bob Schumann was there, and he said, "That's the first time I've seen a sunrise." Whoa. Two priests came for a night from New Camaldoli Hermitage in Big Sur. They're Benedictines as well. They joined us for zazen. Brother David joined them on a walk up the road to the horse pasture, which they followed to the meadow. There they celebrated the sacrament of the Eucharist in a Mass with Tassajara bread and an orioke bowl for a chalice. When I was head monk, two brothers from the Camaldoli Hermitage came during practice period to join in our practice for a few days. I don't remember their names, but one was called Father Prior, as he was the abbot for a 2-year term elected by his brothers. Before they left, we met with students in the dining room. Father Prior spoke. He told us about the daily life with readings of sacred texts and contemplation at Camaldoli. He said he admired that we had meditation without an object, but that he didn't feel comfortable in contemplation without an object of devotion. He said he appreciated that there were women and men together at Tassajara and wished they could do the same, but that would take time to implement. He assumed that problems arose from the two sexes practicing together, but he felt like there was strength in that natural combination. He said that when it's all men, they tend to get competitive, and when it's all women, they tend to get petty. A student asked if he believed Mary was really a virgin. Father Prior said the original word we translate as virgin also meant she was pure of heart. Someone asked him what he thought about the concept of original sin, and he said they'd been made to feel their body was bad and dirty by priests when they were a kid. Original sin has nothing to do with there being anything wrong with your body. It's the separation of heaven and earth. Oh, so it's just like ignorance in Buddhism? So why didn't they teach us that in catechism? Father Prior sighed. Oh, what do you expect from catechism? That got a laugh. It became apparent that we had a lot more in common with these contemplative monks than we'd expected, especially when the conversation moved from the teachings, beliefs, and myths to the practice, the core. Someone pointed out that not all Buddhist meditation had no object, that in Zen there was zazen, following the breath, counting breaths, koans. There were students who used mantras, who'd included practices from other sects, had focused on loving kindness or an image of the all-compassionate Avalokiteshvara. Dean Winter was an evangelical missionary in South America who was with us for a month back before we first opened for guests. The Benedictine monk named Dustin Morrissey came through a few times. He thought we should let him help us set up a pottery studio, but work leader Bob Watkins said he had a long list of chores that would have to come first. Morrissey was looking for a remote piece of land to farm and build a hut. He'd been in the diplomatic corps in Egypt before he became a monk. He talked about the great Christian mystics, Meister Eckhart, the Cloud of Unknowing, and Pseudo-Dionysus. He'd read Alan Watts and listened to his radio program, was impressed by a talk Richard Alpert gave. He'd sat at the Berkeley Zen Center. He was appreciative of Zen and Hinduism, but he was drawn to Christian symbolism and was comfortable with the path of Saint Benedict. Now and then there would be Quakers join us in the Zendo. Dan Welsh came from a Quaker family. I once drove Suzuki to join with their Stockton group in meditation, followed by a talk he gave. In Quaker meditation, there is no leader and anyone can speak up at any time, but they are mainly silent. So in Nakagawa, with whom Dan had studied in Japan, said that he respected Quakers, but that their meditation reminded him of Rodin's The Thinker. Michael Murphy and Dick Price were Stanford alums and psychology majors who'd had pivotal experiences in meditation and wanted to explore ways to deepen their understanding and share it with others. Murphy had spent a year and a half at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry, India. Aurobindo's dynamic and positive teaching emphasized our individual and collective spiritual evolution. Price had been influenced by Aldous Huxley's ideas on human potentialities. They were introduced by influential Stanford professor Friedrich Spiegelberg, under whom they'd both studied Asian religions. They'd been attending Alan Watts's classes at the American Academy of Asian Studies in San Francisco when they mind-stormed the idea of creating a center for the exploration of ways to awaken our human potential. Murphy's family owned a hot springs in Big Sur on the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean that, like Tassajara, had been used for thousands of years by the Esalen and other Indians. There they founded the Esalen Institute in 1962. Alan Watts gave the first lecture. Spiegelberg, Watts, and a formidable cast of visionaries contributed spiritual nourishment to Murphy and Price's new venture, among them Aldous and Laura Huxley, Gerald Hurd, Gregory Bateson, Abraham Maslow, Guy Fu Thung, and Fritz Perls, who led encounter groups there for 5 years. Tassajara had a close relationship with Esalen. Mainly we did our thing and they did their things, but there was some exchange. Tassajara students would go there for brief stays and participate in workshops. In the fall of our first year, 18 Esalen staff and residents came to Tassajara to be guest students. Suzuki led a one-day session at Esalen the following year. Joe Kamiya from the Langley Porter Neuropsychiatric Institute was conducting EEG electroencephalogram biofeedback tests on people's brain waves during meditation at Zen Center and Esalen. Kamiya came to Tassajara as a guest, and I spent time talking to him about his work in the dining room. He conducted EEG tests on a number of people. He said that Shunryu Suzuki and Dining Katagiri both just slept, but that Michael Murphy and Richard Baker registered theta waves indicative of deep meditation. Murphy and Richard Baker had become close friends, a relationship that would continue. Murphy came to Tassajara with his wife Dulcie and George and Lily Leonard. George Leonard was the West Coast editor of Look magazine and an enthusiastic participant and contributor at Esalen, whose passion was Aikido. I gave them a pitch for a workshop I could do at Esalen called Dig a Ditch, Fill It In. A week of no content. Murphy, congenial and accepting as always, told me to name a date. Dick Price, who was the director of Esalen, would walk into Tassajara alone. One day I was out at Grasshopper Flats chopping wood when he sauntered in at about 11 in the morning. He'd left Esalen at daybreak. That's quick going. He was lean, in good shape. I offered him lunch, but he said he'd just nosh on some trail mix. He spent a while in the hot water and headed back. I was at Esalen for a few days. It was a much looser place than Tassajara. Nothing was required of me. Got up early and sat looking over the ocean as the sky lit up. Price was down in a ravine meditating on a great stone that he sat on every morning. I got a most pleasant massage from a resident and gave her one in return. There were people meditating in the hot spring plunges and a couple being quite amorous. I admired the naked vegetable gardeners against the background of the Pacific Ocean. Price invited me to join in a dream workshop he was leading. In it, one by one, people would tell about some significant dream. He'd encourage them to go deeper, and they'd respond. He'd push them to discover more. Every one of them ended up sobbing. It was my turn. I told about a really yucky and scary claustrophobic dream I'd had where I was trapped in some enclosed space that was with some sort of creepy, threatening, chicken-like beings, a feeling of suffocating in their freaky feathers. Dick asked questions, and I answered, and he pushed and tried to get me to go deeper. But to me, it was just something that had happened, and I'd processed it by dreaming it. A heavy dream, but I wasn't into their trip. I think I might have failed in the eyes of my fellow workshoppers, but not in Dick's. He was a friendly, non-judgmental person. Once he gave me a card signed by him that identified me as his guest. He said it would not expire, a lifetime pass to Esalen. Damned if I didn't lose that wallet. Murphy said he'd give me another, but I didn't take him up on it. So there's just one piece this week. I actually was going to have 4 again. No, I was going to have 3. But I spent too much time on that. And I want to go to bed. And Bondi's barking. And I'm not even going upstairs to record this with my good mic. I'm doing it with my earbuds. There's one thing I want to add in there. Where it says Suzuki gave a talk at Esalen, he gave 2 talks. I want to go back and deal with that a little and just correct it, say he gave 2 talks. And then I want to look at those 2 talks. I have them in our lecture archive, although they weren't in the Zen Center lecture archive because they don't belong to Zen Center. They belong to whoever, it's unclear, to Esalen or whoever owns the Esalen archive or anything. But that's baloney. There was something that said proprietary material, and there was just nothing there. I said, what, are you kidding? I just got hold of it, and they were selling it. I just bought one of the tapes and put it in the archive. It's not made from the original, but it's fine. They're fine. And anyway, I'm going to go over them and take some material out of them and quote it. I don't know, maybe a little, maybe more. Just add that because it says he gave talks at Esalen. So let's bring in a little something from the talk. All right. Let's see. Here's the notes I made that I was going to fix. I left out that the universal precept of. So do as little harm as possible. So it just says do as little harm as possible without identifying it as the universal precept. So I hope you didn't feel lost. Now, when I quote Father Prior, the two Catholic priests that came from Camaldley Hermitage in Big Sur, and some of the things that I say he said he did say, like about men and women practicing together, and he really wished they had women, and also about not feeling comfortable about doing meditation without an object. But then the other things I had him say are actually from Father Steve Frost, who did the Christmas Day podcast with me, and I talked about them there. But I just wanted to throw them in, because they're good points coming from a Catholic priest. And, I always feel that everybody's idea of what Christianity is and what Catholicism is just the lowest common denominator, the very worst of it. And there's some good of it, too. Now, I'm not really interested in practicing it or anything, but I respect it. And, you got there's a lot of value in there. It's got it's got it's got perennial philosophy. It's got ultimate teaching in it. And just because people screwed it up, well, that's nothing new. They screw everything up. They screw Buddhism up. We screw everything up. So that doesn't mean that you throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's sort of an example of cancel culture. Everybody's using that so much these days that you can't use it anymore because it's used by all sides to represent anything where somebody disagrees with them. But I really don't believe in rejecting all of what's coming from a person or an institution or whatever because of what in it one finds offensive or doesn't agree with. Miss out on a lot of good stuff that way. Take what you like or what you agree with, and the rest, you relate to everything individually too, and then you can relate to it as a whole. But anyway, enough on that. I have some other things I want to add, but I can add them later. They don't matter. You won't notice the difference. Okay, so that's enough of that. So hey, see you next week for more Tassajara Stories, the early years with Shunryu Suzuki. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Senor with Doggy Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. We're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.